Thank you for joining, and welcome to the Autopilot Showdown of 2026. It's March Madness, and I'm very excited to launch my YouTube channel here. If you're new to any of my platforms, my name is Kevin Malinowski. I am a Microsoft 365 and Intune Cloud SME, and here to talk about cloud native strategies around Intune device management and primarily Autopilot. So let's jump into it. All right. So before we jump into the real showdown between our Autopilot devices, we first do need to have a word in terms of what our focus is around this blog, and that's always cloud native. And there's always a question with Autopilot I'm constantly see come up, and that's really around hybrid devices, right? How do I get cloud native hybrid devices? And what if I told you those two things are not, they're mutually exclusive. They really don't combine to a singular package, right? So some things about hybrid join in the context of all of these discussions, we're really not going to be considering that. In general, hybrid has always been a bridge step for more established organizations with traditional Active Directory domain services, domain joined computers, to be able to bridge to cloud native, understand what it looked like, what it felt like, and have a path to get there, right? It was never really meant to be a long-term solution. In general, it requires a good amount of maintenance. And when we talk about cloud native, zero trust, and zero touch provisioning, high touch really does not fit in that stack. And if you do try to make this work in your environment and in Autopilot specifically, you will run into limitations. Specifically, what I've seen primarily around things like the managed installer for app control for business, right? That modern app locker. And also I've seen when organizations try to adopt passwordless approaches, a lot of times using Windows Hello for Business and multi-factor unlock, you're never going to get around the password being something that's usable. So at the end of the day, unfortunately, hybrid join does not match our criteria in general for cloud native. And if you're looking for where to get more information around here, I'll put this link in the comments, but right here's a great document from Microsoft Learn around hybrid entre join and when we want to use them. If I scroll up, we're actually going to be looking, the title of this article is Microsoft Entre Join versus Hybrid Entre Join in Cloud Native Endpoints, right? And when we go down here and we just skip here, we can get sort of Microsoft's take here. And then that's what I always like to follow, right? There's a lot of detriments, right? These are joined to our on-premise AD. We're always going to need a line of sight for that initial login and for device management. It creates long-term management problems, and at the end of the day, these are not cloud native. If your organization is ready and wants to be cloud native, then Entre Join is our decision. What I recommend is when you're considering cloud native modernization, if you're doing a roadmap, if you're doing a review of your environment, if you've never started with that mentality of start with a greenfield project, complete from scratch, and build it up to meet our zero touch standards, then unfortunately, while hybrid join seems like a great idea and it mixes well with our existing environment, it's gonna hinder us in the long run and it's not recommended. So with that, we're gonna get back to the showdown. All right, we're gonna take a look now at 3 different scenarios that I find pretty commonly used with Autopilot. So while we're looking at these different use cases, we're gonna be looking at Autopilot V1, that traditional Autopilot that was managed by a reseller or your internal IT department for a cloud native provisioning technique. With this, we're going to follow the general community guidelines best practice of skipping the UserESP stage during the enrollment. So we're going to look at V1. We're also going to look at Autopilot V1, but where we don't skip the user page. And we're also going to see what that's like when we tack on pre-provisioning. This is a really helpful technique that probably a lot of IT departments could benefit from. And then last but certainly not least, we are going to look at Autopilot V2. It's not really V2. It's called device preparation. So we're going to be looking at autopilot device preparation and how that relates to the V1 strategies and how it also flips it completely upside down on its head, but I think in the best of ways. So we're going to look at this in 3 rounds because it's important that we measure these, I think, in 3 categories I'm going to look at. And off the bat, speed is not one of them. I am not concerned with minutes or seconds here. We're looking for these processes to get done, I would say, in about 60 minutes, worst case scenario, right? So let's put that as sort of like an artificial barrier, right? Worst case scenario, 60 minutes in terms of speed, but we're really not going to measure things against that. We're not going to measure our results against what's the fastest, because depending on the time of day, the type of computer, where it's at when it comes out of the box, it's really hard to control that with autopilot. So we're going to look at this in 3 rounds. Round 1, we're going to look at controls, right? What are the full controls that we have around this autopilot technology? And what controls, importantly, do we not have, right, with these solutions? Round 2, we're going to look at that enrollment experience, what the user goes through, and what their experience is, and also as an admin and help desk, what our experience is through that. And last and not least, for sure, is going to be the visibility into the enrollment process and reporting back to us as admins so we can get some insights into, how are our deployments doing? How is our enrollment progressing? We really want these things to be successful, right? We don't want to see failures. And all of these things, I think, taking into account, is going to help you choose what works best for your environment. So let's take a look. So round 1, we're going to take a look at controls. So I've had Intune open here for a little bit. Let's take a look. If you're new to Intune, this is our traditional device overview pane. Definitely I recommend hopping into Windows, the operating system you're going to look at, and we're going to look at our controls around enrollment. All right, so traditional autopilot V1, you'll find our controls down here, and you'll see these are really spread out. So a really important part, and sometimes overlooked and all times missed, is the enrollment status page. This is actually that experience in terms of like what's getting installed and what's not getting installed for our end users. So let's dive in here and take a look at some controls. Keep in mind, this is for autopilot V1. So right here, we're going to be able to configure some things, set some custom error messages if we want to instruct the user on what actions to take if there is an error. Really good to do that. This is just the default message here. May be good and recommended for you to instruct and give some custom instructions if there were to be a failure. But again, we're aiming for no failures, right? Looking down here, we have some options about when to show ESP, whether that's only out of the box or for new user sign-ins. Also, a newer feature as of 2026 is installing Windows updates, which can result in device restarts, which can result in increased auths. So definitely, these are all things we want to test before just saying, yeah, let's use it. But this is the kind of control we get. And the most important part here is blocking device until all apps and profiles are installed, right? We're going to have whatever we might use, right? If we have maybe some important applications, right? Google Chrome, we have an agent here for managed services, the Windows app, Visual Studio Code. These are all things that we can mark as required, and they will enforce at the proper device or user level that they're assigned. So you can see we get a lot of good control here. We can make multiple enrollment status pages and scope them appropriately. For me, one works. I feel like for most people, one works. This is not going to push all these apps. It's only going to push the apps that are applicable to the devices. Really important to note. Navigating back out here to the enrollment page, the other key part of Autopilot V1 is our deployment profile. So we'll look at a few here. You can see, again, the ability to create multiple profiles, but we're going to look at our traditional Entra AD joint here. Entra ID, that's a little aged, huh? But let's take a look and we'll see our deployment mode options. We have your user-driven, some noted flexibility here we have is self-deploying. That's really helpful with assigned access machines, or more commonly referred to as our kiosk, those public use devices. Self-deploying really helps with us avoiding that common pitfall of using like a enrollment manager, which really is advised against, and also sometimes just our IT staff provisioning our devices as their account as opposed to the assigned user. That really creates problems in the long term, and we want to stay away from those. So you'll see we have a lot of options here, even the option to allow pre-provision deployment and create a custom device name template. So for V1, I will say natively, this is something that you get, and you do not get that with V2, but there are some approaches. And also, since we know with V1 the device identity and hash, we're able to control the whole experience from the second it checks into the network. So we're going to really tighten up that user experience. It's going to be tight, it's going to be predictable, and you're going to get pretty good control on V1. Now, changing gears, we'll take a quick look at our Autopilot device preparation policies. So this is a very generic profile. Keep in mind, with V1, our use case was always scoping against a known device. With V2, this is traditionally a really good scenario for kind of BYOD type of acquiring your own device, but it's going to be company associated. This is where we're going to scope to our user identity, okay? And we're going to set up some mechanisms here with the device group that retroactively enroll the device. If you're curious about this, I do have a blog post from a handful of weeks ago. Definitely recommend you check it out. V2 is some really underutilized stuff, and it's going to walk you through a pretty good baseline. I don't want to get into the details too much here, other than to show our settings here. We have very similar things, such as blocking apps, and some out-of-the-box experience settings, but not all that we're going to get in V1, right? Because we're not going to understand the identity of the device until the user makes a very key decision during enrollment, and we're going to get to that next. Before we wrap up here, we're going to just take a look and see that you can choose specific scripts to target during these. This becomes very, very helpful with that one thing I mentioned, the device name template. My blog post that I mentioned earlier has that script if you're looking to test V2. I personally like to name my V2 devices something different so I know, right? It's a visual cue, different name, different enrollment path. But you certainly could mirror those. It's up to you. It's your environment. I'm just here to help. So taking a look overall at our round one controls, I think it's pretty clear that we see from a direct out-of-the-box boot up, V1 is going to give us all-encompassing controls. But I would personally argue many of these controls are things that our end users can handle and make proper decisions. And with the right conditional access policy control set, there's really little to no downside to at least trying V2. You're going to learn to get around some shortcomings. And I will say that a lot of documentation and public posts have stated that V2 is becoming a mainstream adopted way of enrolling our devices. And it wouldn't surprise me if we start seeing V1 converge with V2 at a very native and singular area. So with that, that concludes round one. Round two, the enrollment experience. To me, if you've made it this far, I really appreciate you watching. This is the part that we've been waiting for. All right, so let's take a look. I've pre-recorded these enrollment experiences on virtual machines. Before I start, I will say enrollment testing around Autopilot on virtual machines is unique. There are some things that just behave differently and do not work. So in general, around virtual machine testing, specifically on Mac OS, and I am running VMware Fusion, which is an awesome free download from Broadcom. Thank you. We are going to understand there are some inherent limitations. We're running on ARM, and sometimes things just work a little bit differently. To me, not enough to make a huge difference if we understand those pitfalls. All right. So welcome to round 2, the enrollment experience. So we're going to take a look, and we're just going to look at 2 virtual machines I had set up. My personal testing platform is VMware Fusion on Mac OS. I love the M chips. They're honestly beasts to develop on. You get a good amount of storage, and these are really good for quickly spinning up machines, snapshotting things, and testing different enrollment strategies. Really awesome. A note about general testing around VMs, I highly recommend you want to finalize your testing on physical machines. That's just my personal preference. I find there to be some caveats with VMs. Once you get comfortable with testing on VMs, you'll natively kind of understand those instinctual things. But from certainly a one-to-one experience, it's not 100% there. So just beware. That's all I'm saying. Now, let's look at V1. So right here, we've got V1 on the side, and we got V2 over here. Right here, we're powering on our machine. So let's put ourselves in our context and center first before we even start watching this. So we are an end user. We may be new, but we'll assume we have an old device, and this is replacing our old device. We've been shipped it from our company. We're powering it on. We're hardwired, and we're about to enroll our machine. So let's go through this experience. So you see the machine's powering on, and just to speed this up a tad, I'm going to increase the speed, and I'm going to pause this video at key points. As you can see, developing on virtual machines does take a bit more time. So right here is important. You can see once we get connected to the network, we're going to come right to a sign-in screen. No options about setting up anything personal. This is locked from the start, right? We've uploaded, or our resellers uploaded, our device hash, and we may have assigned this to a user, we may have not, but they're about to provision it. Now, a note on provisioning. I am a very big proponent, at least in testing. If you haven't gotten one of these guys, get one of them. It is a YubiKey. Let me show that. USB-C. I'll put a link in the description of this video, but really awesome. All of my sign-ins are going to be using this device. Think of, if you're familiar with Windows Hello for Business or just traditional passkeys in the Authenticator app, identity on a chip. It's really good stuff, really convenient, awesome for testing, not phishable. And if you're an IT administrator and you're managing multiple identities, whether it's admins or test accounts, user accounts, passwords, push notifications, you're at risk. Use one of these, get one in the link. You're going to be able to manage all your identities on it. I'll link the good version that gives a nice level of control through their companion app. Definitely grab one of these. You're going to be happy you did. If you need help setting it up, drop a comment, and we'll go through that on the next video. So without further ado, let's take a look at this. We're going to log in. Now I'm going to choose the use your face and fingerprint here. There we go. So we'll see we're logging in. When we are signing in with one of these awesome FIDO2 passkeys, we are going to have a security key that's set on it. Super handy, right? Just like a cryptographic security key for our device. We confirm that. We'll give it a second shot here. And hey, sometimes mistakes happen, and it's good to understand. Walk the end user through it a second time. It's gonna work. We choose our identity from our FIDO2 passkey, and already we're provisioning our device. All right. While that's going and going through the steps, we're gonna just start up V2 and take a look at what this looks like. So again, you'll see we're at a setup screen, but this is straight out of the box. Imagine you go to Best Buy, you pick up a Windows machine, user is gonna hit all of these steps, even connected to the network. So it's really important to know, right? V1's a direct dump, and we get to the device setup stages that we're used to. V2, it's gonna be more of that traditional consumer experience, which in my opinion, it's not a bad thing if our environment suits that. Now, you'll see we just skipped the device name setup. I mentioned it earlier in the video. I've got a script for this. Review my recent V2 blog post. While this looks different, we still have pretty much full control, especially over device name. We can definitely control that. We can script it. It works well. I've tested this, I would say, probably on roughly 500 endpoints. Through enrollment, zero touch, no issues. Definitely check out the script. User is going to choose work or school as opposed to personal. And again, FIDO2 passkey is going in and we're going to authenticate with our phishing resistant passkey. Can't talk enough about these things. So awesome, right? Real quick too. Way better than entering a password. I think, honestly, I would argue the worst part of enrollment is probably entering your password. And then, now an MFA code, right? If you want more info on these, drop a comment and we'll talk more about them. I want to know what you want to hear about. So drop comments. Would love to hear that. All right, so pause here, right? Let's take this in. This is a pretty big difference, right? We have some insight on V1 to security policy, certificates, network connections, a lot of things that, I mean, I don't know if we need the end user to know all that. I much prefer the sleekness, the modernness, and quite frankly, the lack of information we're giving to eyeballs. We're on a need-to-know basis with zero touch. I'd argue this is maybe a little too verbose, but not the end of the world. I will say pretty goat status here. Percentage. Please just bring the percentage to V1 and I'll be happy personally. Honestly, they're both great, right? Both really resilient. You really can't go wrong picking one or the other, but you can go wrong if you don't know why. Okay, and that's really what's most important to me. So we're gonna speed up a few of these enrollments. This is going, let's speed up V1 and kind of see where that gets to. All right, keep in mind, we're not going through the account setup here. We're gonna follow traditional community advice to skip that on these, right? And pause right there. Oh wait, we're basically mirroring V2 functionality on V1. I said it. When we're skipping UserESP, technically, it's not one-to-one, but from a butt-in-seat feeling, it's one-to-one to me. So I think it's just good to know this stuff, right? It's good to talk about technology as approachable as opposed to chaotic or complex, right? These things work super well and can be really palatable to our end users if we are comfortable with them ourselves, right? We don't want to be guessing. We don't want to be thinking Autopilot is not going to work for us. It is our friend, and these are both top-tier experiences, much better than I've ever seen from an imaging platform. And you'll see this is going to progress here. Machine is going to reboot, and after reboot, we see a little visualization of ESP. That's going to dump us to our login screen. Now, depending on your security baselines, you may go straight into a desktop. In my opinion, it's very hard to control that. And as our security baselines grow, you're going to introduce reboots to your endpoint. So we're going to learn to accept those. Log in with our FIDO2 security key on our pre-provisioned identity to the device. And that's going to sign in. Now, we'll see V2. Look at that. Looks like something triggered a reboot in V2, and it's still going through the process. We'll speed it up a little bit, and we'll see that it's back, and it's just picking up where it left off. Most likely an app or policy that may have triggered that reboot. We'll see once it determines where we're at and that everything has been enforced as required, we allow the user to proceed. They will then have some additional privacy settings, which again, we can control these with settings catalogs after the fact. I don't want us to be scared about V2. It's very important to me. So again, we'll see we're back to that same login screen here. And we're going to log in. Now, if you haven't used the web sign-in feature of Windows 11 or experimented with it, I highly recommend it. I didn't finish the auth here because there are some quirks with security keys, but it's really helpful to get more of a enforced security sign-in experience on Windows 11. Definitely worth testing out. Again, if you want to hear more about it, drop a comment. And yeah, definitely want to know what kind of content you guys want to see on this channel. Just starting up, and appreciate the eyeballs. Going back to V1, you can see we're going through the Windows backup and restore options for the end user. Really awesome security features. Again, if just check out my blogs in general, I've written a little bit about all of this. We're going to set it up as a new machine, and you'll see users dumped right in. Our custom taskbar layout applies, and we have a provision machine up to the device level. Now, if we add user apps, it's key to note, they're still going to install here. Okay, we're still going to need to give that some time. We may need to reboot the machine a few more times, but for all intents and purposes, for day one, we're in a really good state on that machine. So very impressive. We're going to look over to V2 here, take a look at the experience here. And we'll see again, we're getting that backup and restore prompt. The user can either choose the option to do that or just set up as a new PC. And again, a bit of a different wallpaper, but pretty much getting to our baseline there. I'd be hard pressed to find a difference there aside from, as I said, the background. But you can see we clearly have our third-party apps installed. We see Google Chrome there. We see a custom taskbar layout. We see the things that we want to see. We're controlling it. We're not plastering the Microsoft Store right in front of their face, right? It's good stuff here. So there we go. That's a little bit of the enrollment experience. But wait. Ding, 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 ding. Here comes Autopilot pre-provision. Now, I appreciate, again, this is a bit of a longer video, so we're going to go through this. But if you have not tested out pre-provision, check it out. So what we've done is we've lifted the UserESP block on this device. But let's say we're an IT department, or maybe our reseller offers some pre-provisioning white glove services before they ship it out of their warehouse. It's an awesome thing to take advantage of. It's going to speed up the enrollment process, okay? And I said speed wasn't one of the rounds here. This is where you're literally taking chunks, and big chunks typically, out of device setup time from your end user. So we're going to take a look at that. Now, this might be something an IT department would do or your reseller would do. But this would be your device coming out of box, on desk, hardwired in, hash uploaded to Autopilot V1. As a technician, we have our Windows keyboard here, right? And we're going to press the Windows key 5 times in pretty good rapid succession. Let's take a look. This is our device. And right there, right, this device hash was uploaded by our reseller. Do pre-provision with Autopilot, with Windows Autopilot. This is going to pre-provision the device with settings and apps. We do next. It's going to go through its traditional checking for updates here. It's going to be checking in to see what profile, what tenant things are registered. And quite shortly here, we're going to see a display to confirm that we are provisioning it to the right tenant and deployment profile. Then you'll see very similar, basically V1 experience here. So right here, our device is going to go through some work. It's going to do some auto enrollment stuff, really convenient. We're not associating user identity yet. We're getting this device basically policy pre-staged, right, to the device level before a user enrolls it. Really powerful stuff. Much more traditional in terms of endpoint imaging, and really, really helpful. So let's speed this up, right, and get through it. You'll see it went through our security policies, our apps, and then it reboots after device is done. And we're going to get a confirmation message to let us know, was pre-provisioning successful or was it not? Perfect. 7 minutes, we reseal the device, and off it goes to the user. All right, so now we've shipped this device to our user. Okay, they're about to log in and go through a enrollment for the first time. Keep in mind, this is pretty much our exact Autopilot V1 experience. Going to use our trusty FIDO2 key. Good stuff. Get one in the link. Highly recommend it. It's a game changer. Choose your identity. They're going to log in. Please wait while we set up your device. Now, it is going to go through a preliminary check. It's going to go through that initial ESP phase. It's going to see that, okay, any changes I need to make sense or initial provisioning are going to apply. We still have to go through the traditional mechanics of Autopilot V1. Once this process finishes, right, we're going to see that we're all set here. We're going to go through another device reboot. So we're at the sign screen. You can see attempting to use web sign-on. Not the most resilient option sometimes. But of course, we've used our security key. So we're able to finish the sign-in process. Now, on our other images, right, we'd be logging in and seeing a desktop now. But that is not what we're seeing. We're back at ESP because we are enforcing that user baseline, right? So our device is going to go through, going to identify any user-based security policies, certificates, or network connections, and then also look for any required or blocking apps that are assigned at the user context. Really good traditional one to understand this is Visual Studio Code. That's what we have here, and that's what's getting enforced. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but on my custom taskbar, we have a pin of Visual Studio, and we did not see that on our first two initial devices that skipped effectively the UserESP stage because it's natively baked into V2, and for V1 we generally are advised against doing that, right? So this is the whole thing, right? Nothing's missing from this deployment, and we're gonna watch as this finishes up here and finalizes that last installment. All right, we're loading. Getting prompted for Windows Hello. Didn't have that enforced on those VMs earlier, but it's also good to note that if you're using a FIDO key, you should be able to enforce Windows Hello. Good stuff. And we are signed in. And as you can see, pretty big difference, right? I mean, not a huge difference, but we've got Visual Studio pinned, and I'm happy about that. It shows us that if we need to take our provisioning one step further and really get a perfect baseline and the perfect experience, we can if we know what we're doing. Last but not least, round 3. This is really important to me. Visibility and reporting. All right. I think far too often I hear a lot of times I'm not sure what's happening on my endpoints when they're enrolling. I don't have visibility into Intune. Things take a while. I hear a lot of that, and trust me, I've been there and I've dealt with the pain. What's important is that Intune is a very resilient platform. What's important is knowing where to go when we need to find information. Now, we're far away from real-time reporting in Intune, and I do believe we're going to get there, and there has been a tremendous focus in general from all areas of Intune leadership that's been fairly public about the commitment to reducing latency on the platform, but also to the commitment of excellence around redundancy on the platform. So, as IT professionals, we understand that we wish things sometimes happen visually faster, but also we need to respect the platform, and these things are resilient and give us an enormous amount of manageability that, quite frankly, didn't exist in such a short period of time. Where we've come is night and day in the last 10 years, right? And it's awesome to see. So whether we're using V1 or V2, the good thing is we have insight, but it comes in a weird area that sometimes people aren't checking, and that's under monitor, right? We're actually going to be monitoring, and we'll see that if we filter this down to enrollment, we're going to have some different options. For Windows, these are going to be our useful monitors here. So let's take a first look at V1. When we look at V1, we're going to see the last 30 days of device enrollments, in general, how long it took to provision those devices, and we are going to be able to click into them and have a little slide out and see some information, the register date, the enrollment date, a few other things below. And in general, I think the most useful thing is how long did it take. It's a really helpful benchmark for us to understand, are these things taking 45 minutes or 10 minutes? Do I have some bandwidth to add a few important apps, or do I need to scale it back? Is there an app that's bloating the time and for some reason running it up to max and failing? Who knows? But this is really helpful. And we're also going to be able to see provisioning types, whether it's self-driven, pre-provision, or user. So really helpful here. If you haven't checked these out, check them out. I find a lot of people don't even know these exist, and knowing is half the battle. Now, let's look into the different visibility we have with V2. We'll see, we get a lot of similar information here, and including deployment time. Now, there was a bit of a time change issue during this deployment, and that's why we see the 3 hours here. Definitely not how long that took, but I will say that V2 tends to take longer than V1. If you care about speed, then V2 probably isn't it. But again, none of these rounds are about speed. It's around having a secure and accurate zero-touch endpoint. So for that, let's take a look at V2 and see what kind of insight we have. All right, we'll see a device name, clickable, some nice links. We see the link deployment policy, the version of that policy, and some other information. Pretty much one-to-one so far. Let's go to apps. All right, see, this is where I find V2. People don't even know this exists, right? This is really cool. This is telling us what was installed during enrollment, the app type, and what was skipped, right? And I find there's a lot of misconceptions during enrollment. So for instance, Visual Studio Code is only going to be a user install when we're installing from the Microsoft Store. So even if we wanted it to install add ESP for V2, right, their version of it, it's not going to go because there's no user phase there. And it's great to have this insight. We can go to our scripts and make sure that they both successfully deployed. And to me, this takes our visibility to a different level. You will get closer to real-time reporting here. You'll even see a phase of policy installation, app installation. Really good stuff. Try it out for yourself. If you haven't done it, check it out. All right, so bringing it all to a close for me, this is my favorite, absolute favorite technology, not only of Intune, but of Microsoft 365. I remember when I discovered that we could image things using Autopilot and cut down on my service desk time to get machines out the door. We could deliver a resilient and consistent experience, and I just remember it elevating the level immediately. And what was even more exciting was like watching every engineer take to Autopilot, love the technology, and honestly start to teach me stuff about the platform that I didn't get direct exposure to at a point in my career where I was not a individual contributor. I was not deep in this technology, but always had a passion. This is such a community-driven technology. It's such a Microsoft-supported technology that really, the end of the day, with this quote-unquote showdown, there is no losing pick. You're gonna have awesome results if you know how to maintain your image, if you know how it's deployed, and if you know the basics and fundamentals of which these concepts were developed on for us to have long-term success on the platform. So for me, if I had to break things down and give you winners and go by round 1, 2, and 3, I'm gonna say for round 1, when we're looking specifically at our control of the experience, it's not even close. A full enrollment experience with V1 takes the cake. There's little to no policy propagation or anything that happens post login. We get everything delivered to the end user that we tell Intune to. Key, that we tell Intune, that we configure on the ESP, that we make sure and we trust and verify that our configurations are accurate. When we do that, when we pair it with the best practices for V1 and have care to the platform, you're never going to get better control with that. Round 2, the enrollment experience. For me, V1 is great. It's like the assembly line, right? It is like seeing probably how like Toyota cars are put together, and it's just so built for scale. It's amazing to watch in action. But to me, V2 is V2 is like the Tesla, the Rivian, right? The cutting edge cars that are really polished, gives us information, reassures the end user, don't worry, you're on a percentage scale, right? Don't worry about it, right? Just enjoy the experience. Put your feet up, go take a walk, go get some fresh air. Great advice, right? For people, especially setting up a new computer. I really enjoy the enrollment experience on V2, but I also think V1 comes in pretty much even. If I had to pick a slight edge, I would pick V2, just because I like the sleekness. And last, for round 3, for visibility and reporting, there's nothing better from an admin perspective than being able to see what happened. On traditional V1, we have to connect to the machine, pull the diagnostic logs. If we connect in real time, we can use some community tools. If you're interested in that, again, drop comments on anything I may not be going into detail on that you might want to see. You get much more of the results delivered to you as opposed to going to inspect them and be reactive, right? So for me, the visibility reporting clearly goes to V2 here. So the final winner of our 2026 Showdown is going to be Autopilot Device Prep V2, but with a hard asterisk that there is no loser in this battle. They're all great solutions. As long as we understand the fundamentals of why we chose things, what the experience is, and how we can monitor those to make sure they're working how we expect, I think we're all going to be pretty happy with the experience. So if there's anything that sounded interesting that you wanted to hear more, please drop a comment on the video. I really appreciate it if you made it this long. This is definitely a pretty long video, but this is a very, very important and fundamental cornerstone of Intune and cloud native management. Again, if you're new here, my name is Kevin Malinowski. I'm a Microsoft 365 and Intune cloud architect and subject matter expert, and I appreciate you for watching. Goodbye.